Welcome to today's Advisor's Assistant webinar. This webinar will help you get started tracking your client's investments with Advisor's Assistant. There are so many features available with the investment tracking that we can't cover everything in a short webinar. Today's webinar is going to focus on how the investment module works, how all of the data is tied together, and how to run the investment reports. Before we begin looking at the details of how investments are added or modified in Advisor's Assistant, let's take a look at what you'll be able to view once your client's investments are set up. Most people use the investment downloads to track their investments, but you can also manually add and edit investments with Advisor's Assistant. Now, I am currently looking at a client that I have set up here in Advisor's Assistant, James Madison. And right now I'm on my Workflow tab, but all I have to do is slide over to my Investment tab and click on the Investment tab, and now I'm on the View Client with Investment Accounts tab for James Madison. Now, please keep in mind that this is sample data. And in order to show examples of what can be tracked and update prices, we have some account types that might not make sense based on the assets within the account. So we've been a little lenient here with our sample data in the system. The View Client with Investment Account screen starts out with a summary of each of your client's investment accounts. But by checking this box, we can also expand this list and see the entire list of individual investments. As with all of the view screens in Advisor's Assistant, you can click on any column title to sort the data by that column. You can resize any of the columns, and you can right-click on a column to decide which columns you'd like to see on the screen. Back on the View Accounts, a very handy feature of the View investment screens is the Calculated To box. This tells me that currently the investments I'm viewing have been calculated to the current date. If you're downloading investments, that will most likely be yesterday's date. But you can actually use this feature to recalculate the client's investments to any past date. If I need to see what the value of the portfolio was at the end of the year or the previous quarter, I can recalculate the entire portfolio to any past date. I'll go ahead and go to the previous quarter. Now, all of the values are as of March 30th. And any reports that I print will have a March 30th value. Once I'm done, I can then recalculate the entire portfolio's values back to the current date. You can also decide if you'd like to see the closed accounts listed on the screen. There are also different perspectives for the account summary. You'll probably mainly work with the investor perspective, which lists all of the accounts or investments for which the client is the investor. Another useful perspective is the household perspective. If this client has been set up as a head of household, and you built a household under the Household tab on the view screens, the household perspective will actually list all of the investments for the members of the client's entire household. So now I have Dolly's investments on the screen and Jimmy's investments on the screen. You may have noticed that there is an Excel action button in the middle of the view screens. By clicking on this Excel button, you're able to send the information that's on the view screen directly over to Excel. In this case, it would be the complete list of all of the James Madison's household investments. Once it's in Excel, you have the full power of Excel available to work with the investments sent directly from Advisor's Assistant. Now, I've returned to the investor's perspective, and I'm going to double-click on Jim's 401k account. The view screen has now changed, and instead of name and address information on the top half of the screen, I now have details about this particular account, including the annualized time and dollar weighted rates of return for this account. Across the bottom of the screen, the tabs have changed, and the blue color coding actually indicates if you have any data in that view screen. We're currently looking at the list of individual investments that are in this account, which for most people will be built using one of the investment downloads such as DST Fan Mail or Pershing. Clicking on the Transaction tab will give you a list of all of the transactions for the account you're viewing. You can sort the transactions based on any of the column tabs, and the transactions in red indicate money moving out of the investment. When you click on the Allocations tab, you'll get a pie chart of the account's asset allocations, in this case by investment. But there are more graphs available on this one view screen. The perspectives across the middle allow you to graph the account by type of investment, by objective, by sector, and by category. And you can change the perspective of the chart and then print these graphs quickly using the Quick Report button. Some of the information, such as sector and category, is not available from the investment downloads. So if you wish to use these graphs and have it show by sector or category, you'll need to fill in some additional information. We'll take a look at how to do that shortly. The new business view allows you to track action items for the account, including follow-up dates. So if you have to track a rollover or transfer, you can make sure everything gets completed for that account. And the Files view allows you to link any type of file, such as a scanned application, to the account for quick and easy retrieval. Double-clicking on the file lets you view it right from within Advisor's Assistant. There's also a Notes button on the account screen, which allows you to track notes specific to that one account. You can read those notes from the account screen, and you can read the notes from the View client with the Notes screen. Back on the Investment tab, you can also double-click on any individual investment to see even more detail about that one particular investment. I've double-clicked on Microsoft, so now the top half of my view screen has details and calculations for Jim's Microsoft investment, including annualized time and dollar returns just for Jim's Microsoft investment. When you're viewing the Transaction tab, you'll see a list of only the transactions for Jim's Microsoft investment. Clicking on the Cost Basis tab allows us to view the shares sold or shares held for this investment. Advisor's Assistant tracks basis by keeping track of lots. These lots are automatically maintained by Advisor's Assistant based on the basis type field in the investment information screen. Advisor's Assistant calculates cost basis using LIFO, FIFO, and average methods. I can also view the lot allocations by clicking on the Modify Action button. And if desired, you can reallocate these lots to specify which lots are assigned to a particular sale. This is a feature you may or may not use. It's available to you if you need it. Clicking on the History tab will show you a graph of the history of the investment based on price or market value. And you can print the graph using the Quick Report button. And this is based on the data that you have in your Advisor's Assistant. To return to the View Client screen, I can just click on the first tab labeled Client, and that takes me right back to the View Client screen. Now that we've taken a look at the view screens and what you'll be able to do once the investments are in your database, let's take a look at how the data is entered into Advisor's Assistant and how it all ties together. This will hopefully help you get a better understanding of how the module works. Before an investment can be added to a client, either manually or through a download, the security itself needs to be added to Advisor's Assistant. When you're downloading investments, the securities are added during the download. But you need to know where the security data is located, because at some point you'll want to edit the security information. To open the securities list, first we'll open the investment toolbar on the left by clicking on the investment bar. To open the securities list, I'll then go to the securities icon and click on securities indexes. This opens the securities lookup. Since a database can have hundreds or thousands of securities, to perform faster, the list does not automatically load. It's set up so you can start typing the information of the security you're looking for to look up that security. You can click on the column title to choose how you want to look up the security and then start entering the information. I'm going to click on name, and then I'll enter an M to start looking up all of the securities in my database that start with an M. The more characters I enter, it will begin to narrow down the list or find the security that I'm looking for. If the security I'm looking for is not on the list, I can either look it up by another field, such as symbol or CUSIP, or I can add the security by clicking on the Add button at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to open an existing security, and you can do that either by just double-clicking on the security from the list, or you can highlight the security and click on the Modify button, and that will open the security screen. I think it will make more sense if we look at an existing security and the information already filled out. So I clicked on the Modify screen, and we are now looking at the Microsoft security that's been added to our Advisor's Assistant. You'll see that there's quite a bit of information that can be tracked for each security. But you don't have to fill out everything that's on the screen. Only those fields that apply to the type of security that you're working with. When you're downloading investments, many of the fields will be filled out for you. You'll mainly want to visit the security screen if you want to add additional information. In the interest of time, we're not going to explain every field on the screen, since many of them are optional. But a full description of each field is available in the Advisor's Assistant Help. Every screen has a Help button, and when you click on that Help button, the help opens exactly to the screen that you're sitting on. Many of our help topics have a video right on the screen, and that video takes you through the screen, and it's this is a little short 9-minute video. But you'll also have a description of each of the data entry fields on the screen. So if you ever have a question about a particular field, please open the help. And then, of course, you have tech support too. On the left-hand side of the help is also laid out like a book with many chapters. And there are a lot of help topics that have help topics that are not attached to a screen. So if you want to learn about emailing with Advisor's Assistant, you can expand that chapter, and here's a whole Getting Started with Email chapter that's not assigned to an actual screen. It just gives you some great information about emailing with Advisor's Assistant. So there's a lot of help available, and especially when you're on an entry screen, we have descriptions of each of the fields. So today we're going to take a look at the main fields that are critical and that people question the most. First, we have the security name field, and of course that's important because it shows on the screens and the reports. It will be filled in during a download, but you may want to edit that name to make your client reports look better. The next section has to do with how you'll be getting the updated pricing for this security. If this is a security, such as a money market, that is fixed at $1, you'll want to check the box, the fixed at $1 box, and then the pricing method will be fixed. If you're downloading the investment, like from DST, the price method will be set to download. You can also manually update prices for the investment if you're not downloading it. If you find yourself manually updating prices or needing to fill in missing daily prices that didn't get downloaded, you'll want to check into our pricing service from SunGard. You can subscribe to the SunGard pricing service that allows you to update your prices and download index values for performance reports as frequently as daily. You can contact our sales department for more information about the SunGard pricing. Always make sure a company is entered so that you can find the investments by company and have the company listed on the reports. Also listed on the screen are the category, sector, and objective fields. Unfortunately, this information is not available from the companies and custodians downloading the investments. If they would provide it, we would fill it in. So if you wish to run any of the Advisor's Assistant reports that graph by category or sector, you'll need to edit the security info and add that data. You only have to enter it once for each security. And then all clients that have that security will have the data available for their reports. You'll notice that there are multiple fields available for identification, such as the symbol and CUSIP. There are different fields because different custodians and clearinghouses send different types of data. DST may send symbol and CUSIP, but some custodians use an internal number for identification that would be filled into the alternate ID field. If you're downloading the investment, the fields that are used by the download will be filled in. If you're manually entering an investment, depending on the type, you'd be most concerned with just symbol and CUSIP. On the right are additional fields that you can enter if you wish to track that information for the security. Now, we're currently looking at the first screen for securities, the detail screen. You can track even more information about the security on the second screen, which allows you to track interest, options, and how often you wish Advisor's Assistant to reconcile if your clearing firm sends daily positions. For fixed value securities that don't send interest reinvestment transactions, Advisor's Assistant will create them for you if you check this box. As I mentioned, you may not have to visit the securities section much, but there is a lot of good information stored for each security, and you may wish to fill in missing information to have richer reports for your clients. So you can edit the securities at any time through the securities lookup. I'm going to click Cancel so that I don't save any changes to the Microsoft security. When you're adding or making changes, always make sure that you click OK to save your changes. Remember, your OK button is your Save button. So I'm going to click Cancel, and then I'm going to click Exit to return to the view screen. Once the securities are added to your database, you can begin to add the accounts and the assets within the accounts to the clients. Once again, this information is added for you during an investment download. But you may have investments that are not available for downloading that you can add manually to include them on reports. Back on James Madison's investment screen, if we wanted to add a new account, we would just click on the Add Action button. The fields that are available at the account level are fields that would be applicable for all assets within that account. So with the account information, you only have to enter this information once, and then it's available to all of the individual investments in that account. You don't have to enter all fields, but the more data you enter, the better report you'll have. I'm going to cancel the Add Account, and let's look at an existing account so you can see the information filled in. So I have Jim's 401k plan highlighted, and I'm going to click on the Modify Action button, and that will open the Edit screen so we can see this account information already filled in. The first screen has details about the account number, the type of account, for example, IRA or 401k. We've got the tax status and the date the account was opened. Once again, in the interest of time, we won't go into all of the fields on the screen since most of them are pretty self-explanatory, and a description of every field is in the help. You will notice a field called Company Control Number. This field is used strictly by the downloads, such as DST and Pershing. If you're manually entering an investment, you can completely ignore this field. You do not need to use it. If you're downloading an investment, this field will be filled in for you, and it will usually be the same as the account number. The important point regarding this field is that you should never change the information in this field unless you're directed to do so by our tech support, because the field is used by the downloads and it's there for a reason. We have to give you the ability to edit it because there may be a reason for you to edit it at some point. Otherwise, we would just hide it. So just remember, don't change the company control number unless tech support asks you to do so. But you can change the account number as much as you like, because you might not like the way the download filled in the account number for your client reports. Change the account number as much as you want for the client reports. Don't change the company control number. The Show on Performance Reports box lets you decide if you wish the rate of returns for this account to be calculated and included on the performance reports. Maybe you're not managing this account, you're manually adding it for your information, and you don't want this account's returns to affect the portfolio returns on the reports that you are managing. And the partner export option ties into our selection reports so that you can choose which accounts get sent to an integration partner when you're using the export option. For example, if you're using Trade Warrior for rebalancing accounts, you could use this option to select exactly which accounts in Advisor's Assistant you're going to export over to Trade Warrior to rebalance. So those are some fields that people sometimes have questions on. Now the second screen that we have for the account is the relationship screen. You can track with the relationships not only the investor and the owner, but all kinds of other relationships, like the money manager, so you can get a list of all accounts being managed by, for example, Curian. The name you track under relationships need to be added as records in the database. And you would add a relationship by clicking on the Add button and selecting the name from the list of names in your database. If the client you're working with has been set as the head of household, you may be asked if you want to add the name you've just selected to the client's household member list. In some cases, if the name is not a family member, you would just say no. The beneficiaries can be selected if it's a name in your database, or you can type unlimited information in the beneficiary freeform text area. When adding additional relationships like beneficiary, if the client is a head of household, you can also select names just from the household members list so you have a shorter list to work from. Advisor's Assistant also has an extra relationship option you're probably not familiar with called Group With. We created the Group With relationship specifically for reporting purposes. While you can create households within Advisor's Assistant for reports, households are typically just direct family members. What if you want to create a report with a different grouping, like a 401k for a company or any other kind of grouping you come up with? That's when you can use the Group With relationship. You can choose any name from your database, an individual or a business, and group the accounts together under that name. Then, when you run a report, you can select all accounts grouped under that name, and Advisor's Assistant will include all of those accounts on the one report. It gives you incredible flexibility because one account can be included under multiple groupings. The last screen for account information is to list any producers or managers for the account. So that's pretty self-explanatory there. And then once you've finished entering or editing the information, be sure to click OK to save any of your changes, and then you'll have the account added to the client name. Once the account has been added to Advisor's Assistant, the investments within the account can then be added. If you're downloading investments, these assets will be added to the account automatically during the download. To add or edit the individual investments, first you need to double-click on the account to change to the View Account screen. So I just double-clicked on the 401k plan. From the View Account screen, you'll have additional view screens available. To add or edit the investments, you need to make sure that you're on the actual investment tab. From the Investment tab, to add an investment, you would click on the Add Action button. Or to edit an investment, you would click on the investment that you wish to edit and click on the Modify Action button. And so we'll go ahead and edit an existing investment. So I'll highlight Microsoft and click on the Modify button. And now we have the Microsoft investment open. Once again, many of the fields on the screen are optional. But the more information you enter into Advisor's Assistant, the more reports you'll be able to run. And a description of every field is available in the help. So we're going to focus on some of the more critical fields. The account number is going to be filled in because we selected the account by double-clicking on it. But if you did select the wrong account, you can change it. And the control number will be filled in for you based on what was selected at the account. The security field is used to select the name of the security from the securities that have been added to Advisor's Assistant. So if you're adding an investment, you would just click on the Browse button to select the security from the list. This will be entered for you when you're downloading the investments. When you click on the Browse button and it opens the Securities Lookup screen, you can select the security, or there is an Add button on the screen. So if you're manually entering an investment, if you do not find the security on the list, you can always add the security right here as you're adding the investment to the client. The basis type tells Advisor's Assistant how to calculate the basis and how to apply the tax lots when you sell shares. This investment is set to FIFO, first in, first out, and always make sure the acquired date is filled in. The other fields would apply to specific investments, so you may or may not need to enter them. The next screen is the initialization screen. First of all, this screen is completely optional. And I want to repeat that because a lot of times when people see this screen, they get very worried. So this screen is completely optional. You do not have to enter any information into this screen. The reason this screen exists is because if you're downloading investments, history is usually not available through the downloads. The investment is started with a current market value and number of shares based on the date of your first download. The only custodian that I'm aware of right now that does provide history is TD Ameritrade. All of the other custodians do not provide historical transactions. This initialization screen lets you tell Advisor's Assistant the number of shares, the values of those shares, and the cost basis as of the close of business on a particular date. From that point on, Advisor's Assistant will track values such as gains, additions, withdrawals, etc., based on the transactions. If you're manually entering investments and you don't want to track transaction, this screen also lets you provide a set of basic values to put on reports without regard to the transactions. So let's go ahead and I'll show you briefly how you can use this screen. So let's take the first example as a shortcut for entering some historical data. If you have an investment that's been around for maybe 10 years and you just started downloading, but you want to have some history in there, there's two ways that you can do it. You can either sit down and enter those historical transactions. You can always sit down and manually enter the historical transactions. That's always an option. But this initialization screen offers you a shortcut way of entering some beginning values. So what you would do is check the box, create initial values, and you need to pull out a statement and give Advisor's Assistant a starting point. So maybe you have a statement of 12/31 of either 2010. If you have a statement of 2010, you would fill in the values that you have of 12/31 of 2010. What was the share balance on that date? What was the price? Advisor's Assistant will calculate the value. And what was the basis? That would be the starting point. Now, if you start back on 2010, you are going to want to fill in those 2011 and 2012 transactions to bring it up to date. Otherwise, Advisor's Assistant will create one reconciliation transaction for all that missing time between 2010 and the starting transaction that was entered with your first download. So to be more accurate, you should fill in all those transactions. Or if you have the statement of 12/31 of 2011, fill in the share balance, fill in the market price, get the value, put in the basis, etc. So if you're going to use this screen, you have to fill in this top section. There has to be a share balance and price and a basis to start out. Otherwise, if you don't have that, then you can't use this screen. The bottom half of the screen is completely optional. In fact, it even says optional transactions. But this allows you to fill in even more information if you know on 12/31 what was the total value of buys, what was the total value of sales, were there any dividends, etc., then just that gives you more data so that your reports are richer. So how much you fill in on the screen depends on how much information do you have. So that's how you can use this initialization screen for a shortcut way of filling in historical data. And I really urge you, if you're going to use the initialization screen, please read the help, because there is a lot of information in the help about this initialization screen. And just remember, this is optional. And if you do have questions about it, because it can be confusing, our tech support is very well versed on helping you get set up with investments. They help a lot of people with the investments. So I mentioned there are two ways that you can use this initialization screen. One way is if you are downloading investments, it can be used as a shortcut way of getting some history information in there. And so you can use it as a starting point. When you fill it in as a starting point, this becomes the initial value to start, and your downloaded transactions are then used for reports for all of the rates of return and all of the calculations moving forward. So the transactions are used for the current values. Well, let's say you're not downloading investments and you are manually tracking your investments, and you don't want to deal with adding transactions. You just want to be able to have one place in Advisor's Assistant where you can type in some values and print reports. Well, that's the other way that you can use this particular screen. You can go into this initialization screen and you can just put in the values and tell Advisor's Assistant to use these values as the current values when printing reports. So that's what this option is for. If you're manually tracking investments, you are not downloading, and you don't have any transactions in your system, and you want to print a client report. You just want somewhere where you can put in a date, put in the shares, put in the market price, type in a basis, and just say, use the values that are on this screen, fill in some buys and sells if you want, use these values on the reports. It doesn't matter what else is in Advisor's Assistant. When you print the reports, if this box is checked, this is the only place the program is going to look, and the data on the screen is what's going to print on the reports. So, as I mentioned, this screen is completely optional. You do not have to use it, and so it can at any time be used if you wish. And if you have any questions, there's a lot of help, and our tech support can also walk you through the screen. And I need to uncheck it because otherwise our reports won't work right. Now the last screen that we have is flex fields. The flex fields are fields that you can customize yourself. And while many people use flex fields for client and policy information, there aren't necessarily as many uses in the investment area because we provide so many fields already for the data that you need for investments. But you do have these flex fields in case you do wish to track additional data that we don't have a field for. And you can very easily name these flex fields. Just click on any of the column title columns, and it allows you to go into the Modify Flex Field title set, and you just go in and type in a flex field label. If I can type today. And it also gives you the format of the flex fields. We have numeric formats. The X's are text, alpha or numeric, and you have dates. So make sure that you pick the right field for the right format. And there are 30 flex fields for each different type of investment that you have. And then make sure that you click OK to save the changes that you've made to your investment. And that's how you can edit or add your investment information. Now that the security, the account, and the investment are added, the transactions can be added. If you're downloading investments, you'll be able to download your transactions daily. But even if you're downloading, there may be times when you need to manually add a transaction. To work with transactions, you need to be on the individual investment screens. The Transaction tab on the Account screen allows you to view all transactions for that account. But you cannot add transactions except to the cash account. From the View Account with Investment screen, double-click on the investment. So I'm going to go back into Microsoft. I'm going to double-click on the Microsoft investment. Then I have to go to the Transaction tab. And so I'm on View Investment with Transactions. And to add a transaction, I'm going to click on the Add Action button. We're actually going to add a new transaction because while you're downloading, you probably won't have to work with the account and investments much. But there may be times when you need to add or edit transactions. Especially if you receive money from a client and you wish to record the transaction to show that you received the money, you can manually add the transactions to Advisor's Assistant to get it recorded, and then the investment download will settle the transaction for you. As with the other screens, you'll only need to fill out the fields that apply to the transaction you're adding. Each field is described in the help, so let's take a look at the key fields that you need to fill out for a new transaction. First, you need to fill out the transaction dates. When you enter the first date and tab off the field, that date will be used for the other two dates. So let's go ahead and back this up by a couple of dates. So I'll go ahead and fill in the 22nd. So when I tab off of that, it does fill in my settled in transmittal dates. But of course, you can change the other dates as you need to. Next, you'll need to select the type of transaction. First, you select the money flow. For example, is the flow between the client and the investment, between the cash account and the investment, or is this a transfer within the account or a transfer between accounts? And I'm going to keep this simple, and I'm just going to say this is between the client and the investment. Once you select the money flow, then you can select the transaction type. The transaction type is going to be different for each flow. I'm going to select a buy from the client. Over on the right, I can now enter 2 of the 3 top fields, and Advisor's Assistant will calculate the third. I'm going to enter a principal amount of $500. And since I have a market price on file for the transaction date, we'll say the price paid was the market price. And that's why I backed it up, because I just wanted to go ahead and use the market price. So once I have those 2 filled in, it calculated the shares for me. Of course, if you're adding the transaction before the trade, you won't have a price. You can just enter the transaction date and principal. And if you're downloading investments, the download will settle the transaction and fill in the share price and shares. So I went back on my transaction date because I wanted to show it did have that market price. It pulled it up because I had downloaded some prices. If this transaction had a different price than the market price, I of course would enter that price, and now everything is calculated for me. Advisor's Assistant will calculate the number of shares and the basis per share. You can also specify amounts that are included in the principal or separate from the principal to be as detailed as you need for this transaction. And if the transaction is a transfer transaction, you can even view the details for the other side of the transfer. This second source screen will change depending on the type of money flow and the transaction you've selected. Advisor's Assistant has blotter reports that you can print for all transactions on file, or you can check the blotter box to specify which transactions you want to appear on the reports. So the client total will change if you put any included in principal amounts, and then the reports will also show if you have any separate from principal dollar amounts in there depending on what is printed on the reports. And the transactions that are downloaded will include these amounts depending on the different custodians and what they include. Once your transaction is finished, Click OK to add it. Now, what's going to happen very quickly, it might happen so quickly you might not see it, but because we're adding a by transaction, Advisor's Assistant is going to recalculate all of my values and calculations because we're adding this by. And there is a notes section that you can type in notes that will be included on some of the reports. So I'll click OK, and it will recalculate, and I've got my buy here listed on the screen, and everything gets recalculated. If you're downloading investments, you most likely will not have to edit the transactions. But companies do sometimes make mistakes. So you need to know how to access the transactions that have been downloaded in case you need to edit them in the future. We've taken a look at the view screens that are available to see all of the details about the investments you have in Advisor's Assistant. And we reviewed how to add or edit the main components associated with tracking investments: the security, the account, the investment, and the transactions. Now, let's take a look at some of the reports that you have available. If I wish to pull a list of clients from my database, such as all clients investing with American funds, I would use the selection reports. So over on my toolbar, I have an icon here for selection reports. When the selection report screen opens, it always opens to the name criteria screen. The criteria screens are designed to help you tell Advisor's Assistant which names or products you wish to pull out of the database. The screens have the data entry fields available, and they're designed so that you just fill in the blanks for what you're searching. To focus on investments, I'm going to click on the Investment tab, and these are all of the options I have for pulling investments out of the database. But one thing to keep in mind is that you can combine information between the name screen and the investment screen. You're not limited to only using one screen at a time. So if I needed to get a list of everybody who's turning 70 who has an IRA, I would use the name screen and the birth date range to find my people turning 70, and then I would go to the investment screen to find the people who have an IRA, and that combined would give me my list of clients. And then I could send them a letter, send them an email, probably a letter if they're 70, to tell them about their required minimum distribution. So you can combine the information between those two screens. You're not just limited to using one selection screen at a time. So in the different sections, here I have my security section. I want to get a list of everyone with American funds. I would just fill in my company American Funds group, and that pulls my list of people with American funds. If I need to get a list of everybody who has Microsoft, I go to my name description for security and find everyone who's investing with Microsoft. So all you have to do is fill in the blanks and look at all of the fields available. Give me a list of everybody who has an IRA or a 401k. I just fill in the field. Give me a list of everyone had a security that was acquired, an investment acquired last week. Give me a list of everyone who had a buy transaction last week or a sell transaction last week if you're tracking transactions. So there is a lot that you can do through these selection reports. Now, I'm going to run a simple list of everybody in my database who has an IRA account. So I fill in my account type of IRA, click on search, and I found 3 clients with IRA accounts. Once the names are selected, I can print a report. I can export these names to another file format like an Excel file. We have different partner exports available. I can go to an email program, a CSV file. I can go to Microsoft Word and print letters or send emails. I can create a little mini database with the subset option. I can add additional names to this option, such as people with a 401k. So there are many other options I have here. On the report side, Advisor's Assistant has many pre-formatted reports that you can print. And the best thing for you to do is print out the different reports to find the ones that you like. And then you can add them to your favorites list. There are over 140 investment reports alone in the system. Let's just take a look. Let's start here with the category analysis and pie chart report. I selected 3 names, so when you have multiple names selected and you open a report, you're actually going to get a report for each client. So here's my first client, Mr. Benchowski. That's actually a sample name that's downloaded from our Albridge download. And so we have a category, and Albridge actually does download categories. It's mainly the custodians that don't download the categories. Some of our position downloads, like Albridge and Orion, do bring in categories. And so this has a nice little pie chart. And so it groups it by category, and then you can see the report below. And then with the Advisor's Assistant reports, on the next page, you have additional information with the total. And then you have a disclosure statement. You can customize the disclosures. I'll zoom in a little bit. You only have to customize the disclosures once, and then it will print on all of the reports. And we are always keeping up with the latest FINRA rules, so we do make changes to the report disclosures when changes occur from FINRA or SEC, such as having to include contact information for custodians. So we keep up with that information. And let me go to another client here, and then each client will then get their own report. Here's James Madison. And remember, we selected IRAs. So we're not seeing all of the investments. We're only seeing the IRA investments on the report because that's what we told the selection to pull. So each client gets their own report from that one selection. And with our sample data, sometimes we don't always get great reports on these. And once again, with the categories and things like that, we did happen to have a couple of good samples, but with categories, you may need to go back and fill in additional information. So if you run reports and you have a custodian like DST FanMo does not provide category or sector information. Pershing does not provide it. So if you want to print these reports, you need to edit that security information with the category and sectors so that you can print those reports. And we also have account summary style reports. So we'll run an account summary. This is without transactions. So this is going to show us, I double clicked on that twice. We have each account number, these are just the IRAs again, and then each investment within, and it always shows, this is older data because this is from Albridge, and we'll go down here to James Madison to get more current price dates, but it always shows a pricing date with the value, so you have a summary there. We'll look at this report again with all of James Madison's accounts. That'll look better. So the list of reports is quite extensive. You can see a description of the report, and the comments give you an idea of how to run the report and what's on the report. And every report has an ID number. So if you pick up a report off a desk, look in the bottom left-hand corner, and there's an ID number on the report, and that way you can find it on the list to print it from the system. So you'll see all kinds of reports listed: cost basis summaries, charts, summary of holdings. Those are your total assets under management reports in different listings. We have reports if you're tracking both insurance and investments for your clients. We have reports with both insurance and investments on one report. We have household reports. So when you wish to run a household report, you do that through the selection reports. Let me show you briefly how to run a household report. I'm going to run a new search, and the way that I would run a household report is I would tell Advisor's Assistant on the name screen which household do I wish to run the report for. And I'm going to run this for the James Madison household, the family of James Madison. So I select the family of James Madison, and then I'm going to go to the investment page, and I'm going to tell it to select all of the investments. And those are the two things I need to do to run that household report. Then what you want to do is, I could run any of these reports. I could run the account summary without transactions, but that's going to give me an individual report for all three clients. If I want a joint report, I want to look at the different names of the reports for a household report. And we have quite a few of them. So you can look through the reports and look for household reports. And I have one on my favorites list. So I'll go ahead and run that one. And the household reports are designed differently. And they're going to include all of the investments on one report. So they're all listed out very nicely. And then it will have a total for the entire household. So look for those reports that are actually labeled household or group with reports. So that's how you can run a household report. So selection reports, I want to get a list of all people that have a particular investment, or household reports, all people that are with a particular company or security. That's what you use those selection reports for. Back on the view screens, you also have the view screen reports. Every view screen does have a report button in the middle of the view screen. So you can click on that report button. Right now, I'm on the view account screen, so I can click on that report button, and it will give me a nice little report summary. In this case, because I'm on the view client with accounts, it gives me a nice little pie chart. So that's another way that you can get some quick reports. Also, if I need to print other reports for this one client, I can use the Current Client Reports button. Clicking on the Current Client Reports icon will select all of James Madison's investments only. So now I've just selected all of James Madison's name and product information, and I'm back on the same screen we saw with the selection reports. So now I have access to all of those same reports. So now let's take a look again at that account summary without transactions, because now we have more data for James Madison, so this report will look a little bit better. And because there's more data, it just takes it a second here. So this is going to print out each of the accounts with each of the assets, and it always shows a valuation date and the market value with a nice summary for each account, and then it shows each of those accounts with a portfolio total. So those are nice numbers. And then it will have the disclosure information, and then we don't have all of our information filled in there. So that is a quick little summary for all of those accounts. And then we also have different summaries. So you'll want to go through and look at the different styles of reports that we have in Advisor's Assistant, because you'll see that we really do have a lot of different styles. We've built up the reports over many years based on what people have requested. So you'll find there are many different reports. Although, now one quick note, as I just showed you, if you wish to print the household reports, you need to use the selection reports option. Current client reports only selects the one client's information. It does not choose the entire household's investments. Now, the last type of reports available for investments are the performance reports, which will calculate the rates of return. All of the reports that we just looked at are statement style listings, cost basis reports, asset under management reports, transaction listings. None of those reports that we just looked at included any rates of return. When you wish to have rates of return, you need to go specifically into the performance reports, because those have to do all of the calculations. The performance reports are opened from the investment toolbar. When you click on the black arrow next to the reports icon, you have the option of running regular performance reports for one time period or multi-period performance reports, including up to 4 different time periods. So I'll select performance reports, and we have another criteria screen that opens similar to the selection reports. This is to allow you to tell Advisor's Assistant to whom you wish to print the reports. The fields allow you to narrow your list down to a specific group of names, such as just one client or one company. Or let's say that you print quarterly performance reports to just a smaller group of clients. You could set up a market of quarterly performance reports and then just select out that one market. You also need to enter a date range for which you're calculating the performance. And you have options here, such as whether you're going to include the account fees or the expenses. So you have many options available here on the screen. If you're using our SunGard download service to download the prices or indexes, you can also include up to 4 different indexes on your reports. Now, whenever you're setting up criteria, you can actually save criteria. So I have saved some criteria, so I'm going to load my James Madison criteria that I've saved before. And I know my dates are sort of older, but there's a reason that I'm going back a few years, because I have some data in there, and I use it to show you how the reports are set up. But I'm going back a few years, and I also have a few values for my indexes that are going to be included on the reports. So I'm actually just going to have my performance here for James Madison. Now, Advisor's Assistant has found all of Madison's investments and calculated the returns. And once again, there are many different reports to choose from. And you'll see in the description, we have dollar-weighted rate of return, We have time-weighted rate of return, and we have return on investment reports. So you will want to go through and see which reports you wish to print. We do have a report, and this is really designed as an internal report versus a client report, but this includes all three types of return, and so you'll probably want to check that one out too. You'll want to print the different reports out that are available and find the ones that best suit your business and go through those. And of course we have a favorites list, so you can add those to your favorites list. But let's take a look at some examples here. So first of all, let's take a look at a more simple report, just a portrait listing. And this is dollar weighted, which is more commonly referred to as internal rate of return. And so we have this for James Madison. It tells us the reporting period, and it gives us for each account, this is listing out each of the individual assets on this particular report. And this is actually why I did this for this date range. I wanted to point out that even though I told it to start from 2005, Advisor's Assistant will tell you the exact date range for the asset, and we have no beginning value because this asset did not start in 2005. It didn't start until 2006, so everything is in the net additions. And then we have a return not only for the time period, but we also have an annualized return on this particular report. Then we have a summary for the account, and it shows that for each account. And then at the end of the report, we have a portfolio total, and then I selected some indexes. So we also have my summary of all of my indexes that I selected with some different date ranges. And we have some different formulas so you know exactly how it was calculated. So there's an example of one performance report. We have many different performance reports available, so that's a more simple report. Now let's take a look at a more detailed report. And you'll see how they vary within the system. Now, this is going to be harder to see on the webinar. So let me go ahead and try to zoom in a little bit here. This is with a chart. So now we have the summary for the account up here on the top. I'll try to zoom in a little bit without losing too much. This is dollar weighted again, same time period, because that's what I had selected up front. Here's the account summary. And then after the account summary, it goes into each individual asset once again, but I have more details for each asset because now it's breaking out the additions, the withdrawals, the reinvested, the gains and losses, etc. So it has much more detail for each account and each investment. And then at the end of the report, not the disclosure page, let me get to, at the end of the report, we have a portfolio summary with a chart. So as you can see, there are varying degrees of detail as to how much you're going to see on these reports. So once again, the best thing to do is to print out the different reports to see what reports are going to work best for you. Some of them have graphs, some of them don't have graphs, and there are a lot of different reports available. And there are also, there's an Excel export available. So on the Excel export, all of these performance calculations are sent to Excel. So you can then take all of these calculations and run your own reports and your own different types of calculations. So that Excel export is very handy. Those were the regular performance reports. We also have multi-period performance reports. The multi-period performance reports also have a criteria screen, so you can narrow down what you're going to run on the performance. But what this allows you to do is select 4 different time periods for one report. And that way, you're able to, and I have some older time frames here, but you can just go ahead and select those 4 different time periods and then run a report. There are summary reports and more detailed reports, and it puts those 4 time frames on one report. And it frames them up and has everything on the one report. So you have a lot of options with the reports and what you include, so you can pick and choose, and quite a few different report formats. What you also have with Advisor's Assistant, in addition to those reports, don't forget the dashboard. So with the customizable dashboard, there are investment-related widgets. So take a look at the different widgets, because there are quite a few assets under management widgets. So this will give you a total summary, because the widgets are looking at everything in your database. So then you get a nice summary of all of the assets that are in your database in different charts. So that's another option that you have with your dashboard, and you can tell Advisor's Assistant to show that dashboard on startup. But really you want to, that value will change if you're downloading investments after you've done the download each day. So you might not want to open up your dashboard until after that download has been done, because then you'll see the new assets under management. So don't forget about that dashboard. So that basically concludes today's investment training. Advisor's Assistant has very comprehensive portfolio management. And in a short webinar, we can only touch on the features available within the investment module. I hope this webinar has helped you understand how the investment module works to help you get started in tracking your clients' investments.